Guys, welcome to another video. We're just gonna go ahead and get started. So before beginning, make sure you know how to declare variables with their proper data types and identifiers. You can do any of these assignments and operations with any variables that you declare, but for simplicity's sake, I will be using I and j. But like I said, you can use any variable you want. So we'll just go over a simple assignment just to make sure we know what's happening. So once a variable is declared, it can be updated later in the program. For example, I'm declaring I and j, but we can change the value of I later, or the value of j later, or the value of I again later. So here we're declaring it with no value I and j, but here we're choosing to assign I equals 5. Here, j depends on I. So I is going to be 5, and at this point in the program, I is going to be 5. So this is going to be 58. It's going to be 5 times 10 plus 8, 58. But the values of variables can be overwritten. So at this point in the program, I equals 10 and j still equals 58 because it depends on this value right here. So what is the value at program termination of I? So like I said, it's going to be 10 because it got overwritten later in the program. So up here it's 5. For right here, it's still 5. But after this point, it's going to be 10. So you can do chained assignments. So several assignments can be chained together. Just be careful with different data types. So here, I'm declaring 3 types of ints, I, j, and k, and they all equal 0. So at this point in the program, I equals 0, j equals 0, and k equals 0. It's very important that you go from inside to outside. So k equals 0, j is going to equal k, and I is going to equal j. So you can change these values. It can be k equals 0, or you can change this and it could be j equals k plus 1, so j would equal 1 and I would equal 1. So like I said, you have to be careful with different data types. Here we're declaring I as an int and double f as a double. So like I said, you need to go from inside to outside. So I is an integer. This is a decimal number. So what's going to happen is going to round down, round to the lowest integer number. So if I equals 33.3, the compiler would look at it as 33. It wouldn't even be 0.0. The compiler would look at it as a 33 because it's an integer number and ints can only be whole numbers. And now going out, f equals I, so f would equal 33.0. This is why we lose that 33. So I equals 33 and f equals 33.0, not 33.3. So I equals 33.3, but it's going to be rounded down because it's an integer. So I technically equals 33, and then f would equal I, which is 33, but the compiler looks it as a decimal number, so that's why we get the 33.0. So here's a question. So I equals 1. These are all integers, by the way. I equals 1, and k equals 1 plus j equals 1. So what is the value of these three numbers? What is going to be printed? And don't look at the output yet. So what do you think would be the answer? So I equals 1, naturally. J equals 1. And k is going to be 1 plus j. So it would be 2. So the output is 1, 1, 2. Alright, so this is compound assignments. Compound means it's compounding, it's adding together. So just think of it as like business, like stocks, compound interest. So the concept is you use the old value of a variable and compute it with the new value. So there's the different arithmetics like plus, minus, times, divide, remainder, and you put an equal sign on the right side. So this means it's compounding. So we are declaring a variable int I equals 5, and at this point we're using the plus compounding assignment. So it's going to look like I equals I plus 2. This is going to be the old value, and by the old value, I mean this value right here. And I is going to be whatever this is. So you look at it as 5 plus 2, I now equals 7. And we actually see this a lot in loops. So it's I equals 5, and then I plus equals 2. That means it's going to add 2. So it's I. The new value of I is going to be the old value of I, which is 5 plus 2. So this is a program that I made. So we're going to start off with j being declared as an integer, 7. And now we're also declaring another variable as a double, which is user. So we're printing out the statement enter a number, and we're asking for input, and it's going to be stored in user, and this is a double. So user equals whatever the numbers entered. So let's say user equals 2.2. Let's say when the program was running, the person that was inputting the number put 2.2. So j plus equals user. So what does that look like? It looks like j equals j plus user. So this is going to be the new value of j, and this is the old value of j, and this is what's inputted. So what's the old value of j? It's going to be 7. And what's user? It's going to be 2.2. So it's going to be 7 plus 2.2, and this new j value is going to be 9.2. Let's say we do it again, right? So j equals j plus user. The value is 9.2, and user still stays the same. It's going to be the same value since we haven't changed it. So it's going to be 9.2 plus 2.2. So the value is going to be 11.4. So now we're going to look into increment and decrement operators. We will see this a lot in loops, especially the for loop. And you'll also see it in a while loop as well. So these focus on plus plus, minus minus. So it really depends on which side of the variable you place it. You can place it on the right side, or you can put it on the right side or left side. You'll see it in the next slide. So this is similar to looking as I plus equals 1, like the compound. So it's going to look like this pretty much, but instead of a 2, it's a 1. So it only goes up 1. Same thing with the negatives. It's going to be j equals j minus 1. So there's two different types. There's prefix and postfix. Prefix is when you put it on the left side, is plus plus I on the left side, or negative. Here's just another example. And then there's postfix, which is on the right side. So prefix, it changes the value before the operation takes place. So if you're trying to print out plus plus I, that means it's going to add a 1 before it's printed. So it's going to change the value. And before it's printed. But if you do it like this way, it's going to change the value after the print. And don't worry, we'll see an example right after this slide. So here's an example. This is an example of prefix. I is going to equal 2. And now we're going to print f. I is %d negative negative 1. So like I said, it's going to change the value before it's printed. So the new value is going to be printed with it. So I is 1 because it's printing the value. It's subtracting before it goes into here. But postfix Postfix is different. So int I equals 2, and now we print out I is %d, I negative negative on the right side. So it's going to print out I is 2, but after this, it's going to be I is 1. So when it's on the right side, it's going to print out I, and then after this is done, it's going to subtract it. But unlike this one, it's not going to print out I. It's going to do first the operation of minusing 1, and now do this printing. Alright guys, so let's do some practice problems. So here's the first question. You guys should pause this, just look at what would be the answer, try to figure out the answer, and come back. Right, so we're going to do our directive, our main. We have two different types of integer variables. I is going to equal 8, j is going to equal 4. So this is a compound assignment with an increment operator. So the way you look at this, it's going to be pretty much I equals I times j. So I is 8 and j is 4. So the new value of I is going to equal 32. But after this operation is done, j is going to increment. So j, the new value of j at this point is going to be 5. So we'll print this out. There you go, 32 and 5. So I maps out to the first number, which is going to be 32, and j maps out to the second number, which is going to be 5. Alright, let's move on to the next question. Okay, this is going to be something similar to that. So we're going to declare three integer variables, I, j, and k. I equals 3, j equals 2, and k equals 0. So we want to look at this from the inner and then to the outer. So for k, it's going to be an increment operator, but it's going to happen beforehand. So what's going to happen is the value of k will be changed right then and there. So k equals 1. So at this point, k equals 1, right? So it's going to be, at this point right here, it's going to be, give me 1 second, let's comment this. It's going to be j times j equals j times k. K equals 1 at this point. K equals 1, and j is going to be 2. So that means j equals 2. And at this point right here, it's going to be I equals I times j. So at this point, j is going to equal 2, and I is going to equal 3. So this I is 3, and this j is 2. So the new value of I will equal 6. K1, now it's going to be j compounds times k, which is 1. So it's going to be 2 times 1 equals 2. And now j is going to equal 2. And it's going to be I times j, which is 3 times 2, which is 6. 6, 2, 1. We'll move on to the next one. Alright, so we have two integer variables, I and j. I will be declared as 7. So remember, be careful with data types. So just looking at this, what do you guys think it is? So I equals 2.5, but I is an integer variable, can't have a decimal, so it's going to round down. So that means I equals 2 and j equals 6 plus 2. So I is going to equal 2 and j is going to equal 8. There you go, 2 and 8. Alright, so this will be the last question. So we have two integer variables, I and j. I equals 5 at this point. And now, for j, it's going to be a prefix of increment value for I. So that means this is going to automatically turn into a 6 before this multiplication happens. So the new value of I right here is going to be 6 times 3 minus 2. So that's going to be 6 for I, and I believe 16 for j. So let's run that. There you go. Because the I is being incremented right here, that's why it's a 6. So it's going to be 6 times 3 minus 2. And this is on the left side, so that means this is going to happen automatically. If it was on the right side, it would not be that value. It would be 5, because this has to happen after the operation, this increment. So it'd be 5 times 3, which is 15 minus 2, which is 13. Let's run that. So 6 times 13, because j depends on I. Alright guys, so that's all the questions I have for you guys. We're just going to take a little look into the future, maybe a couple of videos later. We're going to learn about the for loop and why this is so important. So you guys definitely don't need to know this yet. I have not taught it, but I just want you to look to see why we use the increment operator so much, or it can even be decrement operator. So we're going to declare 3 integer variables, I, j equals 1, and n. So I and j don't have any values yet. And I'm going to ask the user how many times you want the loop to run. So the user will input, I want the loop to run 7 times, or 6 times, or 5 times. So what this does right here, this for loop, it's a loop that we're declaring I equals 0. So for the first run, I will equal 0. And we have this condition right here that it has to stay true, but once it's false, it'll stop running. So once I is the same value as 7, this will stop. So for the first run, I will equal 0 and n would equal 7. So it would run, and then after it would run, it would add 1. So then I would equal 1, and n will still equal 7. So it would do that for 7 times if I ask the user to input 7. And then the loop has run %d times for j, and I'm changing the value of j right here. So this j is just pretty much saying how many times it's running in the loop. So we'll just input it real quick. We'll just compile and run it. So how many times do you want the loop to run? And I just say, let's put 3. So it would run 3 times. So the loop has run 1 time. Remember, this is j. Then after this loop has gone, the loop has run 2 times, and I would add 1 to j. And the loop has run 3 times, and I would add 1 to j. Like I said, you guys do not need to remember this right now. I just wanted to show you how this would work. So I want the loop to run 8 times. It'll run 8 times. So I hope you guys understood what we were learning. For the whole video, the for loop you don't need to know yet, but it is a very big part of a lot of programming languages, especially C. So we'll definitely get a lot of practice of for loops. But for right now, I just want you to get used to the increment and decrement operators. So I'll see you guys in the next video for sure. Thank you guys for watching. Leave a like and subscribe. Thank you so much.